you guys for the gift. Honestly, is really sweet.
More than enough.
It is.
Uncalled for, really.
Don't ever
Not
say,
necessary.
don't ever say I didn't do anything for you. Okay, today's, yes, Trish, we'll get to this. We'll start. We'll be serious. Okay, all right. Today's the final class of World War I. The next time Vandal Catholic will meet in class, Vandal Catholic class time will be next January for the Civil War course. Today we are on Epidemic postscript, the Spanish flu, followed by what came next, 1919 to 39, followed by a video which I will not be showing you online because there are perks to actually coming to class. And you should ask yourself, do I need to have another cup of coffee in my pajamas, or should I come to his class? And I think you know where I stand on the question. People that come to class get rewarded, those that don't get punished. Okay, point number one.
That's kind of subjective there.
Spanish flu, number one. What I'm going to do is, like normal, I'm going to, like normal, I'm going to go through the stats. I have like 35 points for you, and then I'll show you the photos. In fact, before I show you the photos of the Spanish flu, I will actually do the second part of the lecture. What came ahead, and then we'll go look at the movies. All right, here we go. Ready? Spanish flu, number one. First documented case, March 1918 in Kansas. Dave Schmidt was correct. He looked this up a couple of weeks ago. Really, thank you. Why is it called the Spanish flu? And he correctly said, Spain being neutral in the First World War led to, if not freedom of press, more free press, less controlled by the generals and propagandists. And a lot of stories about the flu are being read out of Spanish newspapers, hence the Spanish flu. It should probably be called the Kansas flu. All right. And a spoiler about what I'm going to talk in the next 20 some minutes. From Kansas, a lot of these soldiers that first contracted this illness, whatever it is, and I say whatever it is intentionally, because I'm going to give you the traditional narrative, and then 2 conspiracy theories about the Spanish flu. And if you've heard me say this in the past, I'll say it again, and with no apologies to anyone. There is no such thing as a conspiracy theory. There are only theories. Again, if someone comes to me and says, people are lizards, right? I'm going to say that person's an idiot. Like, thank you for exercising your free speech, you're a moron. Like, moving on, right? I don't have to label him like a tinfoil hat because he's just an idiot. The earth is flat, false, F, fail, right, bye. I'll listen to anyone's theory on anything, right? I think what's sad is, in our very conspiratorial age, conspiracy theories is often used to kind of denigrate anyone you don't agree with or like, right? So if I don't like the fact that, I don't know, I don't want to get into rabbit holes, but I don't like X, whatever it is, I will simply label partisans of X as conspiracy tinfoil hat people, because therefore I don't have to listen to them. You don't have, if you're crazy, I don't have to listen to you if you're seriously. Because I'm scared, maybe if I hear what you have to say, maybe it makes sense. Maybe I have to consider that. I don't want to go there. So anyways, I'm going to give you the traditional narrative and then 2 theories, and you tell me. I swear to you, I really believe in that kind of professorial purity of my job is not to tell you what to believe. I'm not here to tell you that the last 2 theories are correct, the traditional one or not. You believe whatever you want. I am dead serious. I'm only here to give you theories and facts and information, and you decide. You parse it out for yourself. We're beginning now with the way the narrative is traditionally told. First documented case, March 1918. 2 years later, it has infected nearly 1/3 of the world population. It's amazing. Today there's 7.9 billion people on Earth. That today would be, infecting 2.6 billion people. All right, it's amazing. I don't think COVID is anywhere close to that. I don't think COVID is anywhere close to 1 billion people infected, right? I haven't checked the ticker, the WHO case count. I think it's somewhere in the millions, tens of millions maybe, but I don't think it's even 100 million, even a tenth of a billion. This would be 2.6 billion people. And God rest all their souls, I'll say that as a blanket forever. I'll talk about, unfortunately, a lot of people that died today, God rest all their souls. About 500 million people killed. People say it's high, that's the high estimate. Forgive me, I totally misspoke. 500 million people are infected, which at that time is 1/3 of the world population. Estimates of death, let's get this straight, right? This matters. from 17 to 50 million. This is the Dave Schmidt point him and I talked about earlier about some battle with the Germans. Anywhere from 20 to 70,000 people were killed. How do you say that? How do you have a variance, right, of 17 to 50 million people? Oh, it's okay, you know, we're both statisticians, you know, we just found our results are 28 million people off. How is that possible? I don't know. But the low end, the kind of conservative estimates are 17 million people killed, high end 50 million, okay? But again, what I think is most staggering, 500 million infected, a third of the then global population. Today, pound for pound, adjusting for, and no pun intended, inflation. The inflation is going on, but the inflation of population, it would be again, you know, over 2 billion people. I talked about already that point about the etymology, the name. It probably shouldn't be called the Kansas flu, but America, and God bless America, I'm a very proud American. America, we are masters of propaganda. We won the war. We saved the day. We're not going to be labeled now with this disease. Sorry, you know. World War I America. I want you to know Chateau Thierry and Bellawood and Pershing and American heroism. Not that we infected the world with the disease. However, it came about. No, we're not going to call it the Kansas flu, the Wizard of Oz flu. No, but Spanish flu, right? Yeah, that was good, right?
Yeah. Wicked witch.
Yeah, right. The virus. Here's some. I'm going to talk about. Again, we go through, I'll stop with all the preambles, the backtracking. I'm going to be talking a lot of information we covered kind of multiple times. Here's the first time I'll talk about some symptoms and kind of, you know, how it appeared. The virus was particularly deadly because it triggered a cytokine storm. That as far, I'm not a doctor, as far as I understand what that is when your immune system overreacts and begins attacking itself, its own cells, kind of. This is why the people said the flu is just as deadly or even more dangerous for younger people because they have strong immune systems. So when their immune system kicked in a triple high gear to fight this virus, it actually ends up harming itself. It goes but that's what a cytokine storm is, as far as I understand. So that cytokine storm, that immuno response is actually worse than the viral infection, which doctors tell us was not really anything out of the ordinary for influenza. However, malnourishment, overcrowded medical camps and hospitals, poor hygiene, et cetera, all of this exacerbated by what? I don't have to tell you, right? This is March 1918. This is when the spring offensive, Operation Michael kicks off. By the whole war, the trenches, blah, blah, blah. That really kind of promotes what people have called bacterial superinfection, okay? In fact, okay, people say the Spanish flu is a virus, but the kind of ravaging that it caused and the overall kind of lowering of the general immunity, I guess, a lot of people actually succumb to bacterial pneumonia. All right, so in a certain sense, I am not an epidemiologist and virologist. There are way too many people today on YouTube and TV like, oh, I know everything about science. I know nothing. This is not my specialty whatsoever. So I'll immediately pause and make full disclosure. As far as I understand, of course, a viral infection and bacterial infection are completely different, right? You can use antibiotics to treat the latter, not for the former. But apparently there's some causal relationship, I guess. The virus is able to just, you know, attack you, beat you up so bad you became more susceptible, perhaps, having a weakened immune system or overtaxed immune system from the virus to the bacteria and all the stuff that was going on in the trenches. And anyways, right? Okay. First wave is early 1918. Okay. And like today, there's going to be a lot of like today, like COVID. Failure to take preventative measures early was criticized, allowing parades to go through not doing what we today know way too well, social distancing and, you know, staying at home, masking up, blah, blah, blah. Really, I showed you this as a preview before. I kind of wish I would have saved it now, because now the little kind of shocking factor is going to be off a little bit. But anyways, yeah. Okay. So it really begins, like I said, again, in Kansas, March of 1918. As the U.S. troops really enter the war, the disease is going to move with them, okay, from Camp Funston, a major training ground for the AEF in America, over into different army camps and on the trenches themselves in Europe. Dave, I remember once asked about the troop displacement. Remember, Woodrow Wilson gets his declaration of war from Congress in April of 1917. But even a year later, early 1918, right when the flu's breaking out, I think there's like 65,000 American troops. they're in the millions a couple months later, right? By the summer, that the 100-day offensive, right, is from August to November 1918. Think of the flu happening concurrently, building concurrently with that. It really is almost very creepy. As the number of American troops increased, that is the same time the influenza virus is being transported with those people coming over to support the Allies at the exact same time. The first wave, go ahead, sorry.
I just went,
Yeah, it is, yeah.
That is kind of interesting.
Right. First wave lasts through the first quarter of 1918. It's relatively mild. Mortality rates were not noticeably above normal. Okay. There were no reported quarantines during the first quarter of 1918. However, important point, this first wave, despite being mild, causes significant disruption throughout all parts of World War I. Three-quarters of French troops are in contact with it somehow. You're just in contact, they become sick with it. Half the British forces, almost 1 million German soldiers. So here's a point, again, in this class, constantly we've layered things and staggered things. Like, look, here's the chronology. Oh, and then here's Our Lady of Fatima. Here's Russian Revolution. Here's this piece. Remember, go back to right before Thanksgiving, Operation Michael, the German Spring Offensive. And it was supposed to be George, we renamed Georgette and all that. That is exactly the time Spanish flu is hitting. Right when the Germans are planning that spring offensive, the stormtroopers, right, stormtrooping, all of that stuff is happening concurrently. Okay.
And I don't think you mentioned the Germans, they too were
almost
afflicted,
almost 1 million German soldiers.
Oh, okay.
3/4 of French troops, half the British forces, 900,000 German troops. Yeah, so it's all on the Western Front. The second wave, which is the worst wave, there's 4 waves. Remember, 500 million people get infected. Anywhere from 17 to 50 million die over 4 waves. First wave, relatively mild. Second wave is the worst one. Second wave begins in the second half of August 1918. So again, August 1918, Black Day of the German Army, August 8th, the Ludendorff sees the writing on the wall. That 100 days offensive. So this is what's so sad about this. Imagine being a soldier on the Western Front, November 11th, 1918, Armistice Day. We finally triumphed. Let's say a soldier in the Allies. We won the war. You're going to be just as relieved though if you're a German, like the war's over, thank God. I can go home with my family, maybe really thank God I'm not even wounded or maimed and I'm okay psychologically. That is when the flu is at its absolute worst. So just when you think you escaped death, here's something that will end up killing more people in this time period, right? 50 million people. I think I read in the first part of the class, what was it? 41 million people are claimed by the Great War. That first lecture that I gave to you guys about Frankfurt and said, and 21 million people died, 20 million were wounded. So 41 million casualties. So just the deaths of this are larger. If you count infected as casualty, it's 500 million compared to 41 million. It's 9 times more. What no, more than that, 12 times more, 13 times more almost. It probably spreads from Boston in Massachusetts to Freetown, Sierra Leone by ships from Brest, where it had likely arrived with American troops or French recruits, et cetera, et cetera. The et cetera is this. This is, and there is, like pun intended, intentionality intended, a lot of comparison to COVID. This is COVID spreading through transatlantic airline travel, right? Why did COVID spread so fast? Because flights were all around the world. In the World War, it being a world war, even though ships move slower, those things are the virus is being transported all throughout the world and at rapid pace for that time. This really is the first global conflict, and so is the pandemic. Yeah.
What about Asia, et cetera? Did it get there too?
I don't, and I'll read through even to the end. Let me check for that for you now. It's a great question.
Since the military was sort of responsible in a way for it.
Yeah, of course. No, it's a great question. The worst part, Asia, again, define Asia. Like Russia got it huge. Russia, the majority of Russia is in Asia, but we call it a European country. India got it worse than any other country in the whole world.
Okay.
India is definitely Asia. And yet to me, India has this very Texas quality of like, it's India, it's its own thing. So yes, it does.
Yeah.
In terms of what we think about sadly recently with SARS and SARS-CoV-2, about China proper, I don't know how much with China exactly, Japan, the Korean Peninsula, I'm not sure. But yes, like to make a short answer, absolutely. It hits Western Asia very, very hard, just like with COVID in Iran, that kind of the Middle Eastern part gets hit, and India gets hit harder than any country in the whole world. So Asia is definitely affected as well. Yes. And here, actually, I can read this to you verbatim. From Europe, the second wave swept through Russia in a southwest northeast diagonal front. And because of the Trans-Siberian Railway, it's able to spread across the whole Asian landmass, reaching Iran and India in September, as well as China and Japan in October. Okay, so it is there. How devastating is it? I don't know if I recorded that, but it's certainly a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
On September 15th, 1918, New York City saw its first fatality from influenza, but what is most sad, most famous perhaps, infamous, on September 28th, 1918, the Philadelphia Liberty Loans Parade, held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to promote government bonds, results in 12,000 deaths. Okay, after a major outbreak at the parade, and you can hear Fauci's voice, the CDC, blah, 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 same kind of thing of like, avoid mass gatherings, social distance, don't, mask up. That is not happening. That maybe is the nadir, the low point of this whole thing. And during the second wave, almost October now, September 28th, so very close to Armistice Day, very close into the war, 12,000 people die on the home front because of influenza. As I mentioned before, the second wave was much more deadly than the first. The first wave resembles kind of a typical influenza season, affecting the elderly often, while younger, healthier people have a higher mortality rate during the second wave. It's more equally distributed, sadly. Really quickly jumping ahead, God rest all our souls. This is not to be flippant, but the third and fourth waves both are not as important as the first wave that kicks it off and the awful second wave. The third wave begins in January 1919. Paris Peace Conference is going on. And the fourth wave goes all the way to April 1920. Right, so already into the next decade. But at this point, I guess you can say that things are kind of tapering off in a sense. Some people have said that, right, this fourth wave from the spring of 1920, that by the summer of 1919, kind of the thing had really kind of died down.
So spring of 20, what was
the fourth wave, January to April 1920.
But I mean the beginning, March 1918, what month kind of do they?
The whole thing, when the whole thing started?
Yeah.
The first wave was March 1918.
Just like us with COVID kind of March.
Crazy, yeah.
But anyway, so March 18 to roughly March, so 2 years.
About 2 years, yeah. No, it's almost like we're repeating history exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
If we're done with that soon.
yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah, if it ever ends. The reason during the second wave the disease is much more serious is, as I earlier mentioned, it was often complicated. The lower immune system was reassaulted or assaulted again by bacterial pneumonia, which is often listed as the cause of case. There's also this really awful thing called Heliotrope Cyanosis, which I have no idea what that means at all. But whereby the skin would first develop two mahogany spots over the cheekbones, which would then over a few hours spread to color the entire face blue, followed by black coloration first in the extremities, then further spreading to the limbs and the torso. After this, death would follow within hours or days due to the lungs being filled with fluids. Other signs and symptoms reported including spontaneous mouth and nosebleeds, miscarriages for pregnant women, a peculiar smell, teeth and hair falling out, delirium, dizziness, insomnia, loss of hearing or smell, blurred vision, and impaired color vision. One observer wrote, one of the most striking of the complications was hemorrhage from mucous membranes, especially from the nose, stomach, and intestine. Bleeding from the ears and petechial hemorrhages in the skin also occurred. So this is that Cytokine Storm, the body bleeding out from inside. Our Zoom link dropped. It's not to be conspiratorial, but it can't be that. Someone's listening to us. Oh wait, no, it didn't drop. It's still on. Oh, it pretended to drop, and then they think that we would drop the mask and say really conspiratorial bad stuff. You can't get me, Zoom. Nice try.
Dr. Zoom.
That's Dr. Zoom. Dr. Zoom, JD, PhD, MA, POS. Public health management. While systems for alerting public health officials of infectious disease they were in place, they did exist prior to 1918, many were not taken. There was a delayed response. However, once things get underway, once there becomes this collective response, how should we deal with this? This may sound familiar. Social distancing measures were introduced, for example, closing schools, theaters, and churches, limiting public transportation and mass gatherings. Wearing face masks became common in some places, although there were debates over their efficacy. Look at the Anti-Mask League of San Francisco. Vaccines were also developed, But as these were based on bacteria, not the actual virus, they can only help with secondary infections, that bacterial pneumonia that was affecting people. A later study found that measures such as banning mass gatherings and requiring face masks could cut the death rate up to 50%. If that's true, that's very good. But this was dependent on their being imposed early in the outbreak and not being lifted prematurely. Does that sound familiar? I mean, this is literally, oh, wait a second. Sorry, I actually printed out COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, this is the exact same thing, right? It reads the exact same way.
But isn't that,
Sorry?
isn't that potentially, we talked about this ourselves. Let's say there's a flood in 1918 and they bring out the sandbags and, well, then there's a flood in 2018. What do? They bring out the sandbags. I mean, it's sort of a, what other response?
There has to be a protocol, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? During COVID, they started like, burying their face in ice cream repeatedly. Yeah, like what do you want?
Yeah.
I agree with that. That's the problem. That's again for the millionth time. I've said this so many times, but why I love being Catholic is I think Catholicism in so many ways tries to see the truth through the extremities on both sides, right? Like, I don't believe that everything like the sources in the media tell us is true. I don't believe everything's a freaking conspiracy. Like, like there's a middle ground of truth, right? And you can definitely, I love that passage. It's in Matthew 16:6. Christ is talking, he says, beware the leaven of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And I always understood that. I don't want to go like full Protestant, like, well, I'll give you my interpretation. But I've always understood that of like, you can fall off the wagon both ways, right? The Sadducees are very liberal, denied the resurrection, kind of liberal churchmen. The Pharisees extremely conservative. And he says, don't be super liberal or conservative. Like, I guess with the pandemic, don't believe everything the media and the authorities tell you. Don't also think everything they're saying is false. It's not like that, right? So you're right. What do you want people to do? Of course, they're going to, hey, there's an infectious disease. Well, let's try this time everyone kiss everyone. I mean, this is stupid. Of course, you're going to social distance. Yeah, you're right. With a world population of 1.9 billion, okay, if as much as 6% died, if that can be taken to be true, right? On the high end, that would mean today for our world population, COVID killing 474 million people. That's how deadly this was, just numbers wise. It's very staggering. In fact, India, which has the highest mortality rate, the death toll in India was almost 14 million people, they think. 14 million people died in India. The decade between 1911 and 21 was the only census period in which India's population fell. Crazy, right? This is absolutely, India, I've heard demographically is going to surpass China by 2040 or something. Like they'll be the most,
trying to take turns.
they're back and forth, right? But they're going to surpass China. So they're always growing demographically. It's the only decade their population falls. In the US, I know what you care about most, and I'm not saying that flippantly, we're Americans. What happened in our country? About 28% of the population became infected, 1/4. And anywhere from 500 to 850,000 died. So almost 1 million Americans. If they take the high end, if the low end is 500,000. The Native American tribes were particularly hard hit, the notes state. Okay, conspiratorial things. Anyone know the two main conspiracies? What are the two main conspiracies for the Spanish flu? I'm going to talk about both kind of briefly. I want you to look at the photos. Well, first we'll look ahead at what happened after our class is over, like what happened in the war period. Then we'll look at the photos. Two main conspiracies. Radio waves, that's the whole thing here today about 5G and that kind of stuff. Again, that to me, yeah, that sounds crazy. Do I know it's crazy? No, I don't. I'll just dismiss it out of hand. Like that to me is equally dangerous, right? As dangerous as it is to believe every conspiracy, it's just dangerous. Oh, I don't understand it. It sounds stupid, so it's false. I don't know if it's false. It sounds dumb, but that is that conspiracy. I'll read that to you in a second. Radio wave. Second one is vaccine. That actually they were trying to, in Kansas, trying to create, I think, a meningitis vaccine, and it went totally haywire. And there was actually no cover up. The doctors in Kansas were like, this is happening. There's all these adverse reactions, and it ended up, somehow just kind of polluting the whole world. The people that go ahead.
As you say, conspiracy, and then you talk about these doctors and researchers. What did you just say? Did they admit, yeah, we goofed and this thing's out of the gates? Or that's
not that's the conjecture part.
Okay.
They wrote in their notes that we administered this meningitis vaccine and this person had a bad reaction. They weren't denying it, saying, oh, it's not that, it's something else. They're saying, oh yeah, we think it's a vaccine-induced injury or whatever that someone was going through. So they established that happened. There were some problems with the vaccination run.
Poof, it must have been the Spanish.
Yeah, but exactly, that part is the conjecture conspiratorial things that then imply. Okay, so I read this, I literally was punched in the face. I know, a Facebook post, exactly, right? Take that as far as you can throw, right? A Facebook post over 320 shares as of August 19th. I know. I'm declaring like the unreliability of the source.
Tell me
Just
more.
explain to you, yeah. On August 19th, features 2 images connected to the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic alongside a lengthy caption. What, quote, they refer to as the Spanish flu is not a flu, it was the result of the introduction of electricity. When the body is exposed to a new form of radiation, it causes illnesses which may produce flu-like symptoms, okay? The only people who died during the scandemic, nice, right? I hate that. Like people call it the prostitutes. Get it? Like prostitutes for like the big pharma. Like it's so gross. Like use high language. The scandemic, the plandemic. It's so obnoxious. Like even if it turns out to be that, it's just still so obnoxious. It's like nah. You know, this guy is a butthead. You know, the only people who died during the scandemic were those who received the dreaded vaccination. How can a vaccine help radiation poisoning? Those who are not vaccinated recover from their symptoms. This is the same situation we are facing today. People are obsessed, whether these people are all nuts, they're crazy. Oh, they're onto something, not for me to judge. People say are obsessed with this connection between the Spanish flu and COVID. When I started digging through research for this lecture, I was more than I can imagine. I was like, oh, it's like that's people that are into the Spanish flu, all they talk about is COVID. So now they say basically the ultimate conspiracy is like that's what we're going through. That Wuhan is the first city to have like full 5G electrified, and it's really this radiation poisoning from this new electromagnetic field, this 5G super small atom, whatever. Also, and I'm saying whatever, purposely like giving you the clue of my ignorance. I don't understand medicine, I don't understand radio tech either. But apparently it's a whole new kind of system, delivery system. And so that's what these people claim is actually causing COVID. Okay, leading up to 1918, radios really for the first time have been distributed across the Western world, casting their waves across large swaths of land. This doctor here, who believes this, says there's been a dramatic and quantum leap in the last 6 months with the electrification of the Earth. I'm sure a lot of you know what it is. It's called 5G. In 1918, after the biggest pandemic, the Spanish flu, this Dr. Steiner was asked what this was all about. He said, well, viruses are simply excretions of a toxic cell. Viruses are pieces of DNA or RNA with a few other proteins they brought out from the cell. They happen when the cell is poisoned. They're not the cause of anything. So they're not in themselves anything. They are just, things being, they're symptoms of something else reacting upon it, right? Here's a long line of stuff these guys, these conspiracy guys, lay out for their belief in this radio thing. They say the first time the technology was harnessed for uses outside of medicine, it was with telegraph lines. Millions of miles of telegraph wires were strung around the earth in the 1840s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Submarine cables related, etc., went worldwide. At that time, a new disease was starting to be reported in the medical literature they called Neurasthenia, kind of anxiety disorder. But from the first time it was described, which was in the 1860s until about the turn of the 20th century, it was considered a physical disease, not a psychological one. Meaning that's a very key thing. That's not something that's kind of an imbalance of hormones in the head. It's actually some physical object acting upon you. Getting poked by a needle is a physical disease, right? It's not you're not imagining it, right? So they searched for a cause and affected enormous numbers of people throughout the Western world and seemed to follow always, they say, the course of these telegraph wires. Wherever telegraph wires were laid, all of a sudden that part of the world came down with lots of neurasthenia. Very conjecture. I have no idea. Sounds maybe it's total BS, right? Then he continues though. In 1889, alternating current essentially was harnessed, invented by Nikola Tesla. And his patents were adopted by Westinghouse, and all of a sudden we can transmit electricity long distances with little loss of power. That year was 1889. 1889 was the year of the first great modern influenza epidemic. And this went worldwide, lasted 4 years and killed millions of people. The very same year this technology is harnessed. And finally he says, Spanish influenza began in American bases in the country where soldiers were trained in the use of radio waves. And the installation of the most powerful alternator, a 50,000 watt one in New Jersey, occurred in September of 1918, which is exactly when the Spanish epidemic became so deadly. That second wave we talked about. Okay, does that sound believable or not? I'm not here to tell you. I don't know. That's it. That is complete BS. Ooh, he's on. I don't know. I really honestly don't know.
And Tesla ultimately lost out to Edison as far as.
Sure, the current wars, yeah, right.
So I wonder if that was a factor, you know?
I wonder how much of like history is like just, yeah, like purposely
You
like.
know, the belief that.
No, yeah, but then it becomes memory hole. We can't let the commoners know this kind of stuff. I remember watching this Russian scientist guy who claims, and he might be literally the definition of a complete quack, right? And what I'm gonna tell you, probably, I hope you think it sounds like a quack, because it's pretty nuts. I hope you're like, well, that sounds normal. He claimed that there's a secret energy on Earth, like anti-gravity, anti-matter stuff, that he harnessed somehow. I want to say I shit you not, but I use too much profanity anyway, so I kid you not. He harnessed by seeing the way a beetle works. He's a freaking entomologist. Oh, okay, a bug doctor discovered the secrets of the universe. Okay, bro, that sounds like the bug doctor was angry that the girls wanted to date the engineers or the medical doctors. So he's like, I'll show them. You didn't go on a date with me. You could have thrown him at Bugmobile. This guy who studied freaking beetles was like, oh, a beetle apparently does like this while doing this at the same time. Like secret, I swear to you, like this, I'm not kidding. See, like double wings. And he like designed this kind of thing that he said he could stand in like a box and he would levitate off this with his energy. I don't know how he initiated, but he could go like hundreds of miles an hour with no protective gear. So kind of in the sense, like imagine flying at the speed of air travel, but with your face, and it wouldn't even move your hair. So it's like a protective suit. It's kind of weird, crazy shizzle. But like, I don't know. That to me, the believability that is like 0.0000000 and almost 100. I think that's complete crock. Again, also, I don't know. Right. So to your point, like, who knows what was like, oh, this was common knowledge. Let's make it completely not. Let's just give it to Edison. Who knows, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
The other theory is vaccines did it. It was a common expression during the war. I don't know who E. McBean is. Gracjan, you're so lazy. You have a quote for us. You don't know who the person is. Sorry. Don't know who he was. At least it's not LL Bean, one of the Vermont manufactured sweaters. E. McBean claims during the war, it was a common expression that more soldiers were killed by vaccine shots than by shots from enemy guns. I don't know. Spanish flu started in American military camp Funston, Fort Riley, USA. And it eventually kills, say, 40 million people worldwide. This is again a large breadth, 17 million. The flu strain only appeared briefly once again, according to the US Atlanta CDC. That was 1976, and they never like found the genome again. Was the world's greatest influenza scourge another well-hidden vaccine disaster? This is where it's again total conjecture. I don't know. I did find an interesting article though, that from the Irish Times from May 2003. So this is like original SARS level. This is May. Sophie, when were you born?
April 2000.
Yes, you were 3 years old. This is a long time ago. I was 16. It's amazing. 2003 is freaking almost 20 years ago.
I was 11.
You were 11 years old. Trish 10. Yeah, we're all young men. The article says vaccine, not virus, responsible for Spanish flu. How do they know it was the virus of Spanish flu that killed millions of civilian soldiers? Blah, blah, blah. It took a British science team to identify the first virus in man in 1933. So this guy claims, this article writer, whoever this person is, Ryle Dwyer, no idea who that is, says that, oh, scientists were not able to even identify what a virus is. The way I understand this is Alexander Fleming invented penicillin, right? The famous, antibiotic. Before Fleming invented penicillin, there was no cure for bacterial infections, as far as I know, right? Just whatever kind of treatments, but not penicillin. And he discovered some beautiful way, right, with like bread or something, like the bacteria got eaten alive. It was beautiful. It was very, very, brilliant. But so this guy is saying here that scientists did not know what virus, what that was, until 1933. So how could the virus exist before it existed? My answer would be, well, just because they didn't identify it doesn't mean it's not there, right? Things don't come into being when you figure that out. Well, I guess I heard country music for the first time yesterday. I guess that's when country music was born, yesterday, right? It didn't exist before I knew about it. Whatever, I don't know. This guy just goes on to say a bunch of stuff that Army records show at least 7 men dropped dead after being vaccinated kind of immediately. And this was maybe the point we we're talking before about, the immediate kind of knowledge of this. Army records also reveal, all from this article, after vaccination became compulsory in the US Army in 1911, not only did the typhoid disease increase rapidly, but all of them did. After America entered the war in 1917, the death rate for typhoid vaccination rose to the highest point in the history of the US Army. Now, maybe it's a third conspiracy.
Wait, I thought it was the meningitis vaccine.
I thought so too. Maybe it was
Oh.
typhoid. You're exactly right. This person's talking about typhoid here. The article says typhoid. I remember hearing meningitis always.
Okay.
What they were vaccinating for at Fort Riley was meningitis.
Is the proposal that the deaths from the vaccine were from the actual vaccine, or that somehow the vaccine released this virus? Did everybody, did they
Probably
say?
both. I think probably both. I think it would have to be the
Okay.
latter in the way you described it though,
Okay.
because not enough people were vaccinated. They didn't vaccinate 500 million people.
Right, okay.
Right. But here's this guy says, this guy who apparently was a part of the Gestapo, okay, already first red flag was. Oh yeah. I was part of the Men in Black. Like I was Area 51. Trust me. Damn it, where's my Jim Beam? Martha, are we already late on bringing my cigars? Yeah, back when I saw all that crazy shit, man, on the desert. Yeah. Okay, so first kind of thing. Okay. First kind of thing. If that claims to be part of the Gestapo, okay, first red flag. Anyone tells me like I remember driving around, Kate and I were driving in Tennessee, we lived in Mississippi, and this guy who's a massive tool bag, and God bless him. But total, he had a whole blacked out car, like blacked out Hummer with tinted windows, and his vanity plate said Black Ops. You're not in the Black Ops. You know, hey, bad guys, come and get me. I'm Black Ops. Look, it's on my vanity plate. If you're really Black Ops, you don't brag about being Black. So for anyone who's gonna like, oh yeah, interview me. You want to hear a crazy story? I'm an alien in Gestapo and okay, so whatever. This guy claims, take that for what it's worth, that the pandemic was an efficient way to rid, quote, useless eaters without destroying property. She says it was a bioweapon. The influenza pandemic was purposely released in order to what he calls a deliberate elite depopulation measure. But according to this guy, it got out of control, and instead of killing the Germans who had surrendered by then, it turned back on everyone else. Mueller, quote, the Gestapo guy, quote, I am not a doctor, you understand, but the double blow referred to a virus or actually a pair of them works like a prize fighter. The first blow attacks the immune system, made the victim susceptible to the second, which is a form of pneumonia. A British scientist told me, actually, he developed it. Now you see why such things are insanity. These things can alter themselves. When it starts as a limited thing, can change something really terrible. What he's arguing is that some bioweapon people designed this as a, hey, we're not defeating the Germans, let's bioagent them. Let's not chemical warfare, biological warfare. They were doing chemical warfare openly with poisonous gases, right? And this guy says that he talks about the rationale. He says in the context of the Cold War, this interview is from 1948, quote, if Stalin invades Europe, a little disease here and there would wipe out Stalin's hordes and leave everything intact. Besides, a small bottle of germs is so much cheaper than an atom bomb, isn't it? And there's some evil diabolical logic there. Like in this pandemic, you kill all these people, the enemy, without destroying their cities, without radiation poisoning. You'll say, oh, we didn't do it. It's nature. I don't know. So those are your arguments. So you tell me what you think. Before we go to the board, let me just tell you what happens after I almost said the Civil War, after World War I has ended. The Russian Civil War will continue until 1922. The Bolsheviks, the Reds, sadly went out, start the USSR. Staying on the USSR, thank God, Our Lady's Assumption feast day, August 15th, 1920, one of the most important battles of the 20th century, the miracle of the Vistula. Józef Piłsudski, who becomes the Polish kind of president, leader, strongman during the time, stops the Russians, defeats them. If not for that, the growing Bolshevik sentiment, Marxist communist sentiment in Germany, what's going on in Germany in 1919? Of course, they lost the war, economies tanked, destroyed. The Deutschmark, I think, was horrible inflation where bread cost like $1 million, literally, actually, $1 million of the currency. They're going to unite that and create maybe a whole Europe. If not for the miracle of the Vistula, maybe there is no Cold War. There's just all the Iron Curtain, as Churchill famously said, it doesn't descend here; it goes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, to Portugal. 1924, Lenin dies. Stalin will rule the USSR until 1953. Stalin is dictator of the Soviet Union for 29 years. 1919, talk about the Versailles Peace, obviously. The Treaty of Lucarno, 1925, very important, interesting thing to know. Piłsudski, the same guy, said any Polish patriot who hears the name Lucarno spits in disgust. What he meant was that in Locarno, the European powers talking to the Russians basically say, well, World War I settled the Western frontier. It settled the boundaries. We got Alsace-Lorraine back, isn't that great? Well, it's French, but the East is open to revision. So if you guys want to attack someone, attack those guys. You see why like Poles and people are pissed, right? Like, oh, okay, as long as the French keep Alsace-Lorraine, yeah, encourage Stalin or whoever to attack the Poles, the Czechs, and the Slovaks, right? Hitler, 1923 is Munich push. He's put in prison. He writes Mein Kampf in 1925. Mussolini comes to power in 1922. Stalin begins his horrible five-year plan in 1928, murdering peasants, agricultural collectivization. The Holodomor in Ukraine, 1932 to 33 is the Ukrainian Holocaust. As high as maybe 7.5 million people are starved to death because the Soviets take all the grain from the breadbasket in Ukraine. Hitler is named Chancellor in 1933. The same year, the Reichstag fire, the Enabling Act grants him this big power. And when Hindenburg, our Hindenburg guy from World War I, remember, this is where the general slept, whatever, from the Battle of Hindenburg. When Hindenburg dies in 1934, Hitler is named Führer. And Führer, as you know, again, literally means leader in German. Like a Reisenführer means tour guide. So it's like the guide, the leader of the country. 1935, the awful racist anti-Semitic Nuremberg laws, right? That you can't, if you're German, you can't even marry someone who's 1/16 Jewish, the kind of pure blood Aryan race type garbage. Saarland and Rhineland, as we talked about, hey, Clemenceau wanted to just totally emasculate the Germans. Hitler's like, well, we have the best army now. We're coming out of the Depression stronger. We have this strong army. They go back in. The French are just still so shell shocked. They lost something. They don't want another war. Well, Trotsky tragically, very terrifyingly said, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. And so Hitler is not going to stop, right? After remilitarizing the Rhineland in 36, he completes the Anschluss with Austria in 38. The awful famous Kristallnacht, Night of the Broken Glass, is in 1939, the same year that the Anschluss, by the way, is uniting Germany to Austria, like into one country, annexing Austria, basically. He takes back the Sudetenland in 39. That's the Czech, the ethnic German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia. September 1st, 39, World War II starts. That's where we're going to stop the whole class. 20 years after the Treaty of Versailles is signed, on June 28th, 1919, the Second World War begins, just 20 years later. And in fact, people said tragically at the Versailles Conference, this is not an armistice, this is a 20-year peace. We've so ground the Germans into the ground, forgive the double ground, but so, put their nose to the grindstone, they're just gonna have nothing but bitterness and resentment. And 20 years later, World War II. And in fact, it maybe starts earlier because you count 1937, the Sino-Japanese War, when the Japanese invade China. Maybe World War I is already beginning in 37, and that would confirm Our Lady of Fatima's terrible warning about Aurora Borealis. When you see the sign in the sky during the reign of Pius XI, you know God is going to punish the world on January 25th, 1938. I showed you those pictures. So, okay, that's it, my friends. I'm going to show you the Spanish flu lecture notes, and then I'm going to call the front office and then invite. I should go down there because I have to invite coffee baristas, people in Monica's, everyone to come watch the Dave Schmidt show.
Hey, can I tell you something?
Yeah.
First, you mentioned you were commenting. I wonder what COVID is in terms of numbers and stuff. And I did find the number here, such as you can believe,
Okay.
right? But they're saying in this article, 146 million total infections,
Yeah, so imagine.
not deaths.
Yeah,
you know,
and
just-
so 146 million, to be proportional to the Spanish flu, we had reached 2.8 billion.
yeah.
It's unbelievable. Spanish
And
flu.
that was from when it started, March.
To now.
or Till September. So
Oh,
it's a
September,
little bit
okay,
better.
so it's probably a little higher now,
Yeah.
right?
September.
But still,
But anyway,
146,
yeah.
146 is still even in pure numbers, less than the 500 million then, even in
Yeah.
pure comparison. But adjusted, it's not even close.
Also, China didn't have much, but Japan really did.
Japan was hit harder.
Yeah.
I said, no, India was the
India
most.
was-
India was the
Yeah,
most.
yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, Spanish flu. For those who can't see on the thing, coughs and sneezes spread diseases. As dangerous as a poison gas shell. Gauze mask to halt spread of plague. A masked nurse. Red Cross worker.
Gauze, like what would that do? You
Right.
know?
Mm.
Epidemic influenza. Remember, it's not the Kansas one, Spanish. Remember that, it's from Spain. Highly communicable. It may develop into a severe pneumonia. So wear a mask. That's how you make your own mask.
And we had all kinds of that too here, you know.
Right. Don't spit.
Yeah.
Spitting spread Spanish flu. But this is the most interesting one I thought, let's point out. I showed you this before, but it's worth getting another look. So maybe I take it back. Maybe I'm glad that I did show you before because it's worth looking at again, then and now. I don't have to tell you, but the left-hand side, obviously I'd be a real moron if I switched them in the middle. I'd be really annoying and unprofessional. The left was always 100 years ago, the right is us in COVID, obviously. Can't see on the, it says influenza masks are now in style. Didn't look cool in your mask. Maybe it's me, I don't usually get like titillated, like the goosebumps, but this is creepy. It's really creepy. Even though Dave, thank you for reducing the creepiness by saying like, what are you supposed, of course, the medical response can be similar to a medical emergency, right? But the congruity is really scary to me. Even like that picture I opened with, right? People working, like, yeah, the computer's different. I don't know what that lady's working on, what she's doing. Her whole desk is being taken up by her gas mask or influenza mask contraption. This is the creepiest by far. That guy, it looks exactly like Fauci. It's not even, there's a better photo. That guy Tuttle, like that guy.
What was his name?
Tuttle, I believe to say Dr. Tuttle.
Huh, that is really.
That is really freaking creepy. If you're gonna see the stupid conspiratorial people, the people deserve to be like, you're a moron. Oh, there are people that are like, they've lived forever, you know, they're like 900 years old. Just use that.
There he is.
Yeah, use that. I mean, seriously, that is really freaking creepy.
So he never died then, and he just changed his
He
name.
just changed it. Yeah, he was actually first born. He was first born in 9/11. He's 1,000 years old. He was dipped in a sacred lake in Bavaria. Yeah, no, like, that's really crazy.
If you can resurrect old video of him throwing a baseball, then
Then
you
we'll
will
know.
know.
Then we'll know. Well, back then he used to throw 95. He was legit back then. It's not like
Not anymore.
not anymore. All theaters closed. Okay. Public gatherings are forbidden. New order released. Yeah. And this is nice. Good job, Gracjan. This is like neat, right? You show here the left, influenza epidemic closes schools, churches, theaters. You have schools, churches, theaters in a row. That's nice. And
What was the upper picture on the right?
class attendance absent, 168 million children. All right, I'm gonna go invite people downstairs and I'm gonna set up the Zoom. Guys, goodbye. Goodbye, good luck. I wish you the best, most happiest break. Merry Christmas to one and all. And I hope some of you get cold. That's my sign.